You're listening to The Briefing, first broadcast on the 24th of June 2025 on Monocle Radio. The Briefing is brought to you in association with ADIS. Hello and a very warm welcome to The Briefing. It's day 2 of Paris Week. We're broadcasting to you live from Studio 5 here at 16 Rue Bachemont in the 2nd arrondissement. I'm Emma Nelson, and coming up on today's programme.
And now that the 12-day war appears to be effectively over, we have an opportunity, I think, to restart a real peace process.
But how wrong was J.D. Vance? Because although Iran and Israel agreed to an immediate ceasefire, minutes later Israel accused Iran of breaking it. We'll have the latest. Also ahead, in the next 30 minutes, the ceremonies begin to mark a decade since the Paris Climate Accord, all under a blazing French midsummer sun. Plus, France and Norway strengthened their defence ties with the signing of a strategic partnership. We'll examine how this will change the regional picture. We'll go through the latest headlines in the French media and ask, does the world really need to see men in tiny swimming trunks? All that right here on The Briefing, live from Paris with me, Emma Nelson. And a very good afternoon to you from Studio 5. It is a boiling hot day here in Paris. We'll be examining the context of that in a little while. But first, let's try and keep up with the breaking news that's been moving all day in the Middle East, because the region did enjoy a moment of respite, hope even, this morning, as a ceasefire was announced between Israel and Iran. Well, that moment was very, very short-lived, because within minutes of the declarations, Israel accused Iran of violating the terms, and the hostilities began once again. Keeping across all this in Paris, I'm joined by Michel Rose, who's senior political correspondent for Reuters. Hello, Michel. Very good to have you in the studio. Welcome.
Hello.
Right. Let's just ask a really simple question. Did the world see a ceasefire at all today?
Well, we woke up this morning and we thought we had one, and that's what President Trump had told us. And as you said, just minutes later, Israel was accusing Iran of sending ballistic missiles. So I think what's happening this morning just shows that war in the Middle East is much easier said than done, and it's the hope in Washington was that a quick intervention would be a quick win for President Trump, and maybe building on what Israel had done by destroying some targets for the regime in Iran, that could be an end to the Iranian nuclear program. But what we see is that it's a bit more complicated than that, and President Trump, who thought that maybe he could have that quick win, sees that he may have opened Pandora's box.
We can explore Donald Trump and his next move in a moment, but first, if we just focus on Iran and Israel and the kind of the logistics of this ceasefire, they seem to follow an announcement by Trump, but also the announcements were made independently, and what the general thought is that when a ceasefire is declared, it is sometimes declared as a joint statement. So the fact remains is that once you have Israel and Iran actually doing their own thing, what does that suggest about good and bad faith? I mean, the mauvaise foi that is so key to the problems in this region.
Yeah, I think it's very hard to decipher what happened overnight, because when you look at Trump's Truth Social post, he said there were still ongoing operations, and that there would be first a ceasefire by Iran, and then a ceasefire by Israel, and then after 12 hours you would see an overall ceasefire, and then all would be well in the world. So it's not very clear who violated what first, but the thing is, this is one of the issues that could happen when you have basically no other international observers in this situation, and you basically have to rely on the he says, she says, and here we basically have just what President Trump said on social media, what the Iranians said, and you have no basic neutral observer that can tell us well, actually, yes, this side is to blame and this side isn't.
The one thing that cannot be disputed, though, is it was the attack that happened on Saturday night on nuclear facilities. We still don't know the extent to which the Iranian nuclear program was destroyed or delayed. But the purpose of that was what? Was to stop the nuclear program, but also to send a very strong message to Iran that it was in a very, very vulnerable position and therefore should come to the negotiating table and lay down arms. 48 hours after that assumption, the fact that hostilities have not ceased has suggested what? That perhaps that those airstrikes by the United States did not do what they were supposed to.
Yes, I mean, there is a possibility when you talk to analysts that these strikes were a tactical success, but a strategic failure, because it's not clear whether Iran's nuclear enrichment capacities have been totally obliterated, if you use the word that President Trump used. That we don't really know yet. So. If what's clear is that a lot of damage has been done to their nuclear facilities. Some of the key people involved in the nuclear program have been eliminated, but we don't know whether there are still there is still a pile of enriched uranium somewhere, and Iran now says that it's wondering whether to continue collaborating with the international organization in charge of monitoring these nuclear facilities. So, with Europeans on the sidelines, it's hard to know what really is the current state of the Iranian nuclear program, and whether that was the final aim of the Israelis and the US. I mean, Trump has been wondering about regime change as well. Was that the real reason, or was the nuclear program the main reason?
And there is also that suggestion that the United States, or in particular Donald Trump, is more willing to listen to Benjamin Netanyahu than he is to the wisdom of his own advisors.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, it looks like it's not very clear how that discussion went between Netanyahu and the US. But Netanyahu has certainly been pleased by the fact that the US went to support Israel's aims in the war. It wasn't clear, from the get-go that Trump would do something like this, because he was elected on a pledge not to go into forever wars, especially in the Middle East. So for Israel, it was a real big success to be able to bring Trump to back it in this adventure, and that, I think, has taken by surprise a lot of people in Washington.
Michelle Rose, senior political correspondent for Reuters, here with me in Studio 5 in Paris. Thank you for joining us and welcome to our studios for the first time. Good to have you with us.
Thank you very much. It was great. Thank you.
Good to see you here. The time here in Paris is 13:08. A quick look now at some of the day's other news headlines. Here's Carlotta Rebello.
Thanks, Emma. Volodymyr Zelensky says he is planning to meet with Donald Trump on the sidelines of the two-day NATO summit after details of an assassination attempt against the Ukrainian president were revealed. The revelations come as waves of Russian drones and missiles in and around Kyiv overnight killed 10 people, including one child. Romania's new pro-European government, led by Prime Minister Ilie Bolojan, has been sworn in, marking the end of a period of political instability and interim leadership. The new Prime Minister, backed by a broad ruling coalition, outlined the government's core priorities as restoring public financial order, ensuring effective governance, and safeguarding citizens' rights. And Taiwan's China Airlines is postponing the retirement of some of its older aircraft due to delays in getting new 787 jets from Boeing. The move happens as Taiwan's oldest airline is in the midst of a fleet renewal, having placed orders worth $12 billion with both Boeing and Airbus. The airline said it could seek compensation from the plane maker because of the delay. Those are the day's headlines. Back to you, Emma.
Thank you very much indeed, Carlotta. Back in London, you're back with a briefing on Monocle Radio here in Paris. Now, en route to a NATO summit in The Hague, the French president made a brief but rather productive detour via Norway yesterday. Productive insofar as the two countries signed a strategic partnership agreement with a broad focus on security. Well, to tell us more about that, and indeed the rest of the approach that Europe is taking to the military and to defence, Florence Biedermann, political analyst and regular Monocle voice, joins me here. Welcome to Studio 5. It's good to see you here.
Good to see you, Emma.
Lovely to have you talking about this, but we have huge issues to deal with here. And I wonder if, before we move on to the Norway issue, which is nonetheless connected, we can begin with something that Michel Aoust said a little bit earlier on, which is the Europeans are forced to stand back in this. In everything that's happening in the Middle East.
Absolutely, but I would say somehow, and sadly, it's not new. I mean, who has been taking decision in the Middle East? It was basically the Americans and Israel. Whatever efforts the Europeans have made over the years, and I would say the decades, their weight was never enough to make anything really conclusive. So this time again, it's even more obvious. Remember that Emmanuel Macron was supposed to take part in a kind of summit with the Saudi king to talk about peace in Gaza and how to get out of the conflict and peace in the Middle East. And, well, it was, of course, as everybody else in the world, apart a bunch of people, he didn't know about the intention of President Donald Trump and the fact that he started to bomb Iran. So all the Europeans have been, really surprised. And they didn't condemn the move, but they can only be, spectators of what's happening and without any role and any way in the decision that have been taken in the US.
And it seems such a long time since France, Germany, the UK were involved in those negotiations to bring about the nuclear peace deal with Iran. I mean, that obviously Donald Trump withdrew in 2019, but this does feel like that belongs to a different time.
Absolutely. So you still hear now the Europeans defending the negotiation option. They all say war and force doesn't solve anything. You can't destroy completely the nuclear program in Iran. You have to negotiate. You must use diplomacy. I mean, I would say this is the main word that is repeated by every European leaders nowadays. Okay, with the exception maybe of Friedrich Merz, the German chancellor, who said, well, actually, Israel is doing and the US are doing the dirty job in the Middle East by bombing the nuclear facilities in Iran. I would say this was a bit kind of more blunt statements, but yes, negotiation. That's the word every president or prime minister has in Europe.
The great example of soft power and the fact that, unfortunately, though, that diplomacy must require an open set of ears and an open mind by the recipient of the diplomatic advances. But if we move now to Emmanuel Macron in Norway yesterday, en route to the NATO summit in The Hague, a bit of a detour, but the purpose for that was to shore up security between Norway and France, wasn't it? That this was something that alliances are being formed within Europe.
It's even larger than that, I would say. I mean, since Donald Trump arrived in power and started to kind of court Vladimir Putin, the Russian president, and since this famous scene in the White House where he scolded Vladimir Zelensky, the Europeans have very well realized, and were told many times even by the Vice President J.D. Vance, that they didn't count that much for the Americans right now. So the idea of Emmanuel Macron, even before, I would say, the arrival of Donald Trump in power, was in any case to reinforce European defense. So now it became even more clear how important it is for everybody, including the Northern Europe countries. Remember that now Sweden and Finland joined NATO, I mean, there is this kind of emergency. They have to face Russia in the north, and they have to make alliance, and they have to develop their own defense capacity, which they are doing. All countries like spending more money on it, even if it doesn't reach the 5% Donald Trump asked them. So the visit in Norway in this sense is very significant because it is an alliance inside the alliance somehow. So Norway is not part of the EU, but it's part of NATO, and Macron is trying to integrate both armies. By the way, he's also trying to sell frigates. This is so French, and we have this defense industry, so he can present this as an integration of the armies. But okay, that's a parenthesis. So yes, this is all in the sense of this European strategic autonomy. They know now. They knew it before, but it's even more clear. They cannot rely on an unpredictable American president who treats his allies sometimes as his enemies.
Well, let's talk. You talked about the parentheses, the in brackets mentioning of the sale of the frigates. But this was an important moment, wasn't it? Because arguably, when Europe is having to rethink its own military identity, France plays a phenomenally important role in terms of the supplier of military equipment and indeed, and frigates. So what does this do for France's hard power image within Europe?
Yes, they try to boast it, obviously. They try to play this more important role in the defense in Northern Europe. But in this case, let's not forget there are also some competitors, So they didn't sign the deal yet. So it remains to be seen if it happens or not. There is also, I think, a UK and German competitors. It's not a purely French thing. But the general philosophy is whatever, like this rapprochement, this defense integration. As you said, they signed this strategic partnership, which means like more integration of their armies, common maneuvering, more common venture in industry. So that's something important.
And if we touch on that industry, there was this round table, wasn't there, involving Emmanuel Macron, talking to representatives of both France and Norway, discussing the likes of energy, industry, technology companies, which, dare I say it, nowadays are as much as a political player as any government could be. When you talk about nowadays, we regularly have Charles Hacker, the commentator, who comes on and he says every company must now see itself as a political entity, given the fact that technology and industry and energy is so deeply tied to geopolitics nowadays.
Absolutely. There is an integration in both economics and politics like never before. I mean, you cannot just talk about pure economy or pure politics. Both are really important. And France also, by the way, decided to have cooperation with Norway in stocking carbon dioxide. This is also an important, new element. They are going to stock it inside the sea, I think, in the marine abysses. So it's all part of the same, let's say, process.
Florence Biedermann, thank you so much for joining me in the studio. It's good to have you with us.
Thank you, Emma.
That was a political analyst, Florence Biedermann, joining me here in Studio 5. You're listening to The Briefing live from Paris on Monocle Radio. Now, this morning, under a blazing sun with the backdrop of orange heat warnings, ceremonies were held to mark the start of 6 months of celebrations of Paris Climate Accord, signed 10 years ago this December. Paris's mayor, Anne Hidalgo, flanked by international counterparts such as Sadiq Khan, stood for pictures together, smiling, but noting also that the big fossil fuel companies were no longer the sole adversary against climate change. Well, to tell us more, I'm joined by Florence Martin-Kessler, who's creator and CEO of Live magazine and a friend of Monocle. Hello, Florence. Good to have you with us. Bonjour.
Bonjour.
Welcome to the studio. Let us begin. Now, you at Live magazine, you were focusing on this an awful lot this weekend, weren't you? You did a big focus on it. You cannot escape, or we cannot escape, the irony of the fact that it is phenomenally hot out there, and we are wall-to-wall coverage on French television of the fact that there are orange heat warnings across a good part of the country.
Yes, absolutely. So we, just to explain, so the city of Paris and the cabinet of Anne Hidalgo, the mayor, asked us to put together a program a while back to celebrate or not, at least to mark the 10th year anniversary of the climate agreement. And so the city of Paris has a new beautiful theater called Théâtre de la Concorde, which is on the Concorde Plaza, and which is a 19th century adorable 600-seat venue with absolutely no heating or air conditioning systems. So it was boiling hot. And so actually the representative of the city and we, as we're welcoming the mayors from all over the world, and I remember there was Kat Gallietto, who was the mayor of Phoenix, and I think I'm sure in Phoenix everywhere you go there is air conditioning. So it was boiling hot, and we said, okay, now we know that we cannot reach the goal of 1.5 Celsius degrees, and so we also celebrated what had been done in the past 10 years, which is the reopening of the Seine, the massive use of bicycles, which was never, which is really a huge public policy pushed by Hidalgo, and which the French and the Parisian had embraced, and it was really a bet. And also the greenery of the city, which, the City Hall Plaza now has a kind of urban jungle starting last week. So yes, it was very ironical, and at the same time, I think she can be proud of what she's done, despite the huge attacks she had.
It's interesting that you sort of hesitated when you talked about the word celebration, because it is very difficult to find the right tone here, isn't it? Given the fact that it is a celebration that people came together 10 years ago, but it is now a moment when the United States is once again no longer part of the Paris Climate Accord, and you are holding events in non-air conditioned theatres, which are very, very hot. And Parisians at the moment are being told, don't use water, but drink water, stay cool, but don't have air conditioning. And that narrative just cannot sit comfortably yet, can it? It's not found its place.
Yes, I thought this paradox were very much in the open, and I think there was this kind of honesty that you don't, and I don't work for the city, and I'm just saying this as like a private citizen. I thought there was an honesty and a nuance around all this complicated and very mixed feelings that was out in the open, and I thought it was not too much of a stiff celebration, and I like that in a way. Maybe you have noticed every year for 40 years on June 21st there is which is the summer, the night the summer, spring becomes summer. There is la fête de la musique, the music party. Paris became a giant dance floor, which was pretty incredible, and the heat was it was a really warm night. At the same time, it was, so it was, you had like bottles everywhere. It was like a lot of drunk people till morning. I think a lot of people came from London and elsewhere in Europe to celebrate. And I was also pretty impressed at the energy to celebrate, which was pretty wild. And it's nice in times of polarization to see all kind of Parisian in the most kind of, open and transgenerational, trends, everything you want, people together dancing in the warm night. It's pretty cool. I like that. And in the morning, they cleaned up Paris, and I was like, wow, the guys from the cities who cleaned up all this was pretty impressive. I was happy to see people come together and celebrate a bit like we had in the Olympics or when the Paris Saint-Germain won a few weeks ago.
Which is, it has a moment of happiness and innocence to that, actually, when people can come together in a very pure way. But if we look at what the longer term prospects are, that, Anne Hidalgo today recognising that when the Paris Climate Accord was signed, the lobbying from fossil fuel companies was the biggest problem, the influence on government. Now we have governments themselves becoming the problem.
It's completely a twist that nobody could forecast. I think that now the facts. You're journalists, I'm a journalist. To witness that is the shifting into the enemy and the shifting ground on which we stand. Very difficult to understand. And even Macron has been, even France. Macron has said like climate was the big thing of his quinquennat, of his mandate, and it's obviously not at all. And so it's really on the back burner, very much. The cities are pretty much at the forefront of it, I think, and it's very sad that governments are a little less so, at least my government here in France.
Florence Martin-Kessler, thank you so much. Creator and CEO of Live magazine. Pleasure to have you in the studio here at Studio 5. You're listening to The Briefing live from Paris with me, Emma Nelson. We're on Monocle Radio. And we are live at Studio 5 here in Paris. It's Emma Nelson here, and we are fast approaching, the time is 13:25, 13:26 here. Just to let you know, a little later on today, we will be back in Studio 5 bringing you The Daily, where I'll be joined by my guests, and we will be bringing you the latest on all that is happening in the world. But we can now talk a little bit about the fact that we are now a mere month away from the great getaway here in France, and attention is turning to some fundamentals, some questions related to the holidays. And when you read the newspapers today, sandwiched between reports on pensions reform and an erotic cinema festival here in Paris, is an opinion piece in Le Monde on the suitability or otherwise of men wearing very tiny trunks to the beach. Now, this is something, obviously, about which I am no expert. So I'm alongside you listeners, trying to on this rather vivid journey that we're just about to embark upon. The man who wrote the piece about the tiny trunks is Marc Bourget. He's a fashion columnist for Quotidien, and he joins me now. A very good morning, Marc. I'm rather disappointed to say you've got all your clothes on.
I do, but trust me, it's not disappointing. It's safe.
Okay.
No.
Why do you think we work in radio? Thank you, Martin. It's really nice to have you. But one man who, frankly, is sort of mounting the charge, if that is an appropriate way to say it, is Monocle's resident Speedo wearer and senior correspondent in that order, Fernando Augusto Pacheco. Hello, Fernando.
Hello, Emma. Unfortunately, I'm also not wearing Speedos, but I am wearing short shorts, if that's okay.
Okay, that's fantastic. Good to know all this. I'm not telling anybody what I'm wearing because it's no one's business. Look, let's talk about this. This article that you wrote, Marc, was you started off by saying that a swimming trunks party has been declared.
Yeah.
Where? What? How?
It's actually a pun, because in France, we say that we celebrate la fête du slip. And when the slips go away, it's la défaite du slip. So it's actually, it starts with a pun. But actually, I was looking around and reading articles on Style magazine, and the idea of wearing Speedos on the beach seemed to be, gaining traction. You could see celebrities in it. You could see fashion editorials based around the idea of wearing Speedos. So I asked myself, as I often do, would I be able to wear it, and should people really wear it? Because when you see celebrities, when you look at pictures, it's not real life, obviously.
Yes.
I like clothes when it's real.
Yes, I am in absolute agreement with you, but I think there's someone on the end of the line in London.
Someone real.
Who is real.
A celebrity,
real,
maybe.
and obviously the level of celebrity of Fernando Augusto Pacheco is blisteringly hot. But Faye, you are, and have very publicly, all over the internet for a very, 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 very long time, put yourself out there in your Speedos to the point where you and your colleagues, and I mentioned this quite a lot, we know everything there is to know about you, Fernando.
Well, but can I defend myself for a bit? Because I would like to create a movement, Speedos for all. Because, I don't want just celebrities wearing Speedos, even if you have a normal body, whatever your size, if you're small, if you're big, I genuinely think it can fit every man. And, of course, we have this image, especially in Europe, of this older gentleman wearing his tiny Speedos with an overly tan skin. I actually like that. I think this is a symbol of beach culture in Europe. So I'm actually quite happy that there's kind of a young generation that perhaps will start using their slips or Speedos again. And of course, you know me, Em, I came from Brazil as well. We have the tradition.
Of course.
And we have the sungas. I don't know if you know about this, Marc. So
no.
Sungas are slightly bigger than a Speedo. It's not quite a boxer. So it's an in-between. So, for example, Marc, you could start with a sunga if you don't want perhaps perhaps a Speedo, it's like a little concession there for you in a way.
I see.
I'm feeling a tiny bit sick. Right, let's talk about the downside of this, which you, Mark, have been very beautifully elucidating in Le Monde. You talk about the fact that the microscopic triangle of colour, which is a beautifully vivid idea, that's lost under the generous belly and between two fatty thighs.
Yeah.
I mean, this is nothing to what Fernando Augusto Pacheco looks like, ladies and gentlemen, but the joy is all in the imagination of radio. But it is that sort of direct thing, isn't it, that the bigger the belly, the smaller the pant?
Yes, definitely. But I mean, in that text, there is a bit of comedy, but the movement, the fashion, the trends always say something about us. And I think the fact that the Speedo is coming back in a way is probably saying something real about the way we look at each other and the way we expose each other. We expose ourselves mainly on social media. So it's interesting to see that something that was basically limited to Italians, because Italians do wear Speedo. You've got the young Italian, very fit, the old guy in Italy. For years I've been going to Italy, and they do wear a lot of Speedos. But in France, it really disappeared over the last 10 years. And the fact that it could be coming back, I think, to me is interesting in the way that we don't dress only for ourselves. We dress also to show ourselves to the people around us, but also to the people that are following us on Instagram, that we take more and more care about what we look like, which is probably a good thing, even though, I mean, lifting and having abdominals is not exactly being fit, but we could argue about that. So it says things, and the impact that social media have on the way we dress, and also on the fashion collection is huge. I remember a few years back, Jacques Mus was saying that he would design a collection in order to have 3 pieces with the same gimmick, so it could form a line on his Instagram grill. It's an example of how trends and how creations by designers are impacted by social media. And I think nowadays, if you wear a regular shorts, navy on the beach and you put it on Instagram, nobody notices. If you wear a red Speedo, maybe exposing more, showing more, maybe you can get a bit more of attraction, and maybe a bit more of likes or dislikes, create something bigger in terms of interaction. So it seems serious, but it's a really a light subject. But I mean, it reveals stuff about the way we live.
Faye, let's come back to you as a committed Speedo wearer. I mean, we see you a lot on the internet, and please, everybody and we see an awful lot of you on the internet. And you know, there was a picture of you a couple of days ago where you're there in very, very short shorts, and you're holding an absolutely wonderful snorkel, and you're all there. Now, why do you do it? Do you do it so that you can show a bit of the bella figura, or that you can you're showing yourself off on Instagram, or you're just happy to be in your pants?
Can I be honest? I think I'm just happy to be in my pants. You know, because I always take a photograph when I'm having like a joyful moment, and usually it is by the beach, and that's what I'm wearing. And Mark mentioned Jacques Mus. I do have a pair of yellow Speedos for Jacques Mus, of course. But there's one thing that actually I agree with Mark. I read, his excellent piece at Quotidien today. But the thing is, I do think this new generation, there is kind of this overly concern about their bodies as well.
Yeah.
And I don't want, the Speedos just to be all about that. First of all, I think some six-packs, they can look very tacky. I like a man that can eat a little bit of cheese and have an ice cold beer.
Said.
Do you know what I mean? So I genuinely think men shouldn't be scared of a Speedo. I know it's a bit hard when you have this pressure from society to have all those six-packs, so I would like to see somewhere in between, and you can wear your yellow Speedos from Jacques Mus.
Being fit and healthy without having six-pack.
Absolutely, and it's so beautiful.
Idea.
Absolutely, because as I said, six-packs can be a little bit tacky.
I like that sentence. I will use it every day.
Gentlemen,
Please.
I'm so sorry we've run out of time on this. I think this actually needs a whole programme. Marc Bourget, fashion columnist for Quotidien, fully dressed, and in London, Monocle senior correspondent Fernando Augusto Pacheco, proudly on a rainy day in London wearing his short shorts. Thank you both for joining us on The Briefing, live from Paris. finally, on today's programme last week, the UAE played host to a prestigious group of global policymakers, planners and city leaders shaping the cities of tomorrow. They were all gathering for the inaugural edition of the Abu Dhabi Infrastructure Summit, going through everything from building inclusive neighbourhoods to climate resilient design, mobility solutions and even destination development. Well, Monocle's executive producer Carlotta Rebella was in attendance to find out how Abu Dhabi is turning big ideas into reality. And one of the people she heard was Mustafa Fahour, who's the Chief Operating Officer at Plenary Middle East, who's been behind some of the region's biggest developments. Carlotta began by asking him what makes a good public-private partnership when it comes to city building.
I think it goes to the last P word, which is partnership. So what's very important is it's great to see it being a preferred choice for a procurer to bring the private sector in and work in partnership together. But the partnership is the critical element where public, private get together to deliver what's best for the community, to deliver what's best for the country, but also to do it in a partnership where private sector can bring innovation, delivery, etc., with global experience locally.
Now, we are, of course, in a region and in a country that there is, from the public side, quite a big vision of what the future of the country should look like when it comes to the built environment. And the work with the private sector plays a big role in delivering that. But that's a conversation that's not as easy in other parts of the world. The public really relies on the private sector to help deliver that. Do you find that the conversation, because of that, is easier here than when you work with international partners?
I don't think it's easier, but it's definitely different conversation, because this part of the world, especially Abu Dhabi or United Arab Emirates, they have the experience of delivering as a public sector. And coming in from a private perspective in terms of financing, in terms of design, delivery, innovation, really allows us to demonstrate what capability, what benefits do we bring as a private sector to support the government to fast track their ambitious vision.
I wanted to ask you as well, because you mentioned community earlier in your previous answer, and there's a conversation as well about public housing that's quite interesting. And, what does good public housing look like for you and for the company, and how do we ensure that through that we deliver more inclusive communities, better quality of life, all those things that we know make better cities?
Yeah, it's been interesting what we heard in this summit from, the chairman of DMT, His Excellency, and the chairman of ADPEC, Engineer Maysara. There's so much focus around community, around connectivity, and these are, for a traditional infrastructure, terms you don't usually hear of. But this is what makes communities, this is what brings people together. And it's all about how can we support our people, our residents, and provide things that are important but don't always have a financial return, like schooling, public parks, and all these different features that don't give you an investment return but provide a better community.
So it's all about thinking about, parks and transport as infrastructure as well, at the end of the day.
Definitely. This is social infrastructure, schools, hospitals. This is all what develops and creates communities, and that's why the UAE, especially Abu Dhabi, has been so successful.
Now, I was reading a bit about the work you've been doing with student housing as well, how that has changed the lives of so many young people. Could you tell us a bit more about the work being done there and why this is such a success?
Yes, so Plenary, in partnership with Khalifa University and the Abu Dhabi Investment Office and ADPEC and all the other key stakeholders, were able to successfully bid and win the first and largest student accommodation PPP in the region. And the beautiful thing about this is that we can bring our global experience on student accommodation, whether it's in Australia, the UK, right around the world, but also use our local experience to bring that together to deliver the best possible outcome for the university.
It seems like the connecting thread between all these different examples of what we've been talking is this idea of, building for the public good at the end of the day and creating a better place to call home. We started by talking about public-private partnerships. What do you think the general public gets I guess, maybe wrong about when governments work with the private sector? Because at the end of the day, it is delivering a better place, a better city. What are some of the misconceptions that you encounter?
That's a good question. A lot of people think the government's given away things. But what they don't understand is this partnership actually helps stimulate the economy. And, you know, I did a panel on ICV, the in-country value, where in-country value is mandated. So in terms of, you know, the local subcontractors or your EPC providers, these are all driven from the local economy, emiratization, your employment. So not only are you delivering asset for the community, but you're also providing this whole life cycle of stimulating the economy for the benefits of local businesses as well.
Well, Mustafa, I have just one last question. We mentioned varied examples of your work, the work of Plenary. What is the connecting thread between all of these different projects? Because they are different. They're not all, you know, not just housing, not just big infrastructure. For you, what is the thing that connects them all? And does it come back to that value of community, I guess?
It does. And this is why this country has been so successful. It puts its people first. And when you put your people first, that drives, that stimulates, that brings people here, and that drives the economy. You know, and they're seeing this benefit over the last 50 years that, you know, the saying was build it and people will come. And I think there's a lot of people coming, if not already.
And that was Mustafa Fahour, the Chief Operating Officer at Plenary Middle East, in conversation with Monocle's Carlotta Rebello at the Abu Dhabi Infrastructure Summit. To hear more from the event, listen to the latest edition of The Urbanist at monocle.com. And that's all the time we have for today's edition of The Briefing live from Paris. The warmest of thanks to all my guests and to the producer, Tom Webb, and our studio manager back in London, Elliot Greenfield. The Briefing's back tomorrow at the same time. We'll be bringing you more voices from 16 Rue Bachremont here at Studio 5. And we're back for the Daily a little bit later too, so join me for that if you can. But for now, from me, Emma Nelson, goodbye. Thank you very much for listening.